there's now a response that is now coming from President Trump as far as two Iranian drones that struck the U.S. embassy in Riyadh that has triggered limited fire and minor material damage. But this is now further escalated when it comes to U.S.-Iran-Israel conflict as it enters day 4. Now, over this development that has taken place in Saudi Arabia, President Trump has now also reacted, and he has now issued another warning saying that you will find out soon what retaliation will be. Now, as far as when it comes to this development is concerned, the U.S. embassy compound, the pictures that have been coming in, that was hit apparently by two drones that resulted in a minor fire. There were no injuries that were reported, but the video shows that there were thick plumes of smoke that came out from the drone hit U.S. embassy, which prompted as far as U.S. nationals and urging the American citizens to leave or to take shelter as soon as possible. Well, another warning, Srinjoy, coming in from President Trump. This is his first reaction post the U.S. embassy attack in Riyadh, saying that there would be consequences.
Another warning, and there have been warnings in the past and there will be in the future. But this one comes from, as you rightly said, the strike on the U.S. embassy in Riyadh. First of all, an embassy, technically speaking, is a civilian target. Secondly, it's in a country where it was not initially expected that the Iranians would hit Saudi Arabia. Now that they have, and they have caused damage. The embassy premises have been hit by two drones. There has been some damage to the embassy. Naturally, there will have to be precautions now. If the Iranians can hit the U.S. embassy in Saudi Arabia once, in Riyadh, it can do it many more times. So those precautions will have to be taken by the consular officials, by the embassy officials in Riyadh, in Americas. So that is, of course, going to happen. You would expect similar attacks on other embassies, other American embassies in the other Gulf nations. So that too would be expected, and this is something the Americans will now have to be prepared for. Absolutely. Of course, the bases were going to be attacked, whether in Doha, whether in Kuwait, whether in Bahrain, and so on.
Well, for that, advisory came in much before that. You know, when it comes to the Gulf nations in particular that host these military bases of the United States, it was much before when it comes to this conflict that had actually started. But embassies and consulates now being attacked or being hit, well, that seems to be a latest as far as this escalation is concerned, Rishabh, because this attack would only mean that United States has now expanded its advisory to other nations in the Gulf as well. Because who would have thought that as far as in Riyadh is concerned, such kind of an incident would be reported, and that too at the U.S. embassy?
Well, definitely, Amita. If you see this depart now that has come in from the State Department, every Gulf state has, the U.S. residents in all these countries have been asked to leave with the first possible commercial flight. So U.S. do understand that now Iran is hitting anything U.S. and no U.S. asset or citizen is safe in the region, given that Iran has now gone on a full-blown attack on American apparatus in the region. We have seen how, be it in Bahrain's Fifth Fleet, or be it in Al Hamad in Kuwait, or Qatar, or Riyadh for that matter, UAE, all these areas have been hit, and wherever Iran knew that there is an U.S. asset, they have hit that. So now U.S. do believe that this can expand further, and U.S. citizen could be at risk because of this war, and hence this depart now sermon has come in from the State Department, and all the U.S. nationals have been asked to take the first commercial flight and leave the region.
Absolutely, because this seems to be another warning that has now come in from President Trump. He's warned that this retaliation was imminent. And while speaking on the incident, what happened at the U.S. embassy in Riyadh, President Trump says that you will find out soon what the retaliation will be, because he's referred to both when it comes to the embassy strike and to the deaths of the U.S. military personnel that has been reported in this ongoing confrontation with Iran. At least 6 soldiers have been killed in action. Now, amid the ongoing war in West Asia, Marco Rubio, meanwhile, has warned that the hardest hits are still ahead. saying that the next phase will be more punishing and that the US will stay as long as it takes. He clarified that regime change is not on Washington's agenda, asserting that the objective is actually to destroy the ballistic missile capabilities.
The United States is conducting an operation to eliminate the threat of Iran's short-range ballistic missiles and the threat posed by their Navy, particularly to naval assets. That is what it is focused on doing right now, and it's doing quite successfully. I'll leave it to the Pentagon and the Department of War to discuss the tactics behind that and the progress that's being made. That is the clear objective of this mission. The second question that's been asked is, why now? Well, there's two reasons why now. The first is it was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond and respond against the United States. The orders had been delegated down to the field commanders. It was automatic. If we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act. So that was the purpose for what this operation is all about. That's what it's focused on. As the President said earlier today, it is on or ahead of schedule. I will defer to the Department of War to discuss the progress being made at a tactical level, but it was the right decision and an important decision for the safety and security of the world.
And was there an imminent threat? Did you tell lawmakers that there was an imminent threat?
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen, and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life.
Well, then, Srinjoy, what do you believe that would have been the original motive of United States on, escalating this conflict with Iran? Was it toppling the regime? Was it killing of Khamenei? Was it that, no nuclear weapon could be developed by Iran? Was it destroying when it comes to the missile capabilities? What exactly has been the main motive of the US? Because different statements have been coming in.
There appears to be a change in the focus of what the Americans are saying. Initially, they spoke about regime change. They spoke about the end of this regime headed by the two Ayatollahs beginning 1979 up to today and bringing in a new government. But we are not talking about that now, is what the Americans are saying. The Americans now seem to say that there are really two or three things that made them go in. One, to destroy Iran's ballistic missile capability. That means not just the launchers, not just the missiles, but also the missile manufacturing factories. In fact, President Trump acknowledged that Iran's ballistic missile capability is not so bad after all. So that's the first thing. The second was, of course, the nuclear capability. Now, America says that Iran had the capability of building nuclear weapons. Now, that again is something that was said before, and in the last round of fighting, America had said that they had completely ended that. Now, again, this issue has come up. So no regime change, instead just ballistic missile destruction, nuclear capability destruction, and also for the first time we heard Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, speaking about the destruction of the Iranian Navy. Now 10 warships of the Iranian Navy, Americans say, according to the Americans, they have been sunk. Now we will have to see how this turns out, but the American focus is now on really three things. First, destruction of remaining ballistic missiles so that all these places, the Gulf countries and Israel, are not targeted, and of course their own bases. Second, destruction of what remains of Iran's nuclear capability. Third, also the political leadership has been decimated to begin with. The Ayatollah was killed on that first day,
yes,
along with 40 top generals and so on.
Yes.
Now, whoever else is left, the middle rung, surviving members of the top rung,
yes,
these are going to be targets.
Well, that is what IDF has
Americans
been doing ever since, when this conflict began last Saturday. The number of people, the leaders, the commanders who have been eliminated, their photos and what, they were leading or they were heading, that has now been also detailed out by IDF. With several of those videos that have also been shared on how they have carried out this entire precise operation, these precise strikes that have been carried out, in particular the IRGC command center as well, that had been hit badly by the strikes.